Hi. So I thought it was about time I made this video. I've had a lot of people ask me, whether in person or online or just generally over the years, what are my disabilities? And that's a really tough question, as you'll find out. I don't really know how to go through them, so I'm literally just going to list them, give you a bit of background and then tell you what happened this year. I think that's the best way to go about it. My medical history is somewhat jumbled and chaotic, and I'll no doubt do further videos on some of the parts I'm about to explain. Sit back, get a cup of tea, and let's hope this doesn't turn out to be a half an hour video. I'm going to go just by what's on my list. The first thing I have is fibromyalgia. I've known that I've had fibromyalgia from a very early age. I went to a rheumatologist when I want to say around 14, and I had 8 of the 11 points you needed to score a diagnosis. There are 20 points in the body. It is an outdated system. I did get retested last year and I hit all of them, unsurprisingly. But last year I went back and I got, like I said, 20 out of 20. I hurt all the time, and that was the only reason for a lot of the pain that many people came up with. So now it's in my officially diagnosed list, which is actually a lot bigger than it used to be a couple of years ago. My New Year's Eve resolution last year was to get a diagnosis to lose weight. I can't remember what the third one was. Not sure about that. But I did those two quite spectacularly. I lost weight, 4 stone, all told, thanks to being ill a bunch last year. And this year, kind of. I have put some of it on now. Thankfully, it wasn't healthy to lose the weight the way I did. And then I got a bunch of diagnoses. And then became more ill. But I won't jump ahead just yet. Irritable bowel syndrome. This is also one I've known about since about 15, but got a name to it last year. I had all the stuff you have to test for it. They tried to do a celiac test. However, to cross over with my intolerances and allergies, it was then that we found out that I was both severely intolerant and allergic to wheat. That wasn't a fun way to find it out. The first time I realised I'd had some wheat vodka, and I had lip swelling. That was, I think, the first the first ambulance visit. There were so many more after that. That was not a fun test to do. I kept having throat constrictions and throat swelling, and I couldn't really figure out why. I just kept taking my antihistamine, and then I realised, it should have clicked a lot earlier, that I was allergic to it. This was 3 weeks in. You have to eat it for a celiac test, at least, I think it's 2 slices of bread a day. My body didn't tolerate it. But I also had around that time a sigmoidoscopy, which is like a mini colonoscopy. You have your rectum and it goes up there, and the up bit of your colon and just peeks around the corner, I'm pretty sure. But the colonoscopy goes all the way around. Part of me feels I should have done the all the way around one, but I am in no hurry to repeat that experience. But then the diagnosis of severe IBS is given because of the inflammation that was in my... I can't remember which part of the colon that is, but he said there was the medical fancy Latin word for irritation. But I've known about it ever since. I have a standing prescription for Buscopan, and I love that stuff. Hay fever, also one I have known about from a young age. This ties in with actually another one of my allergies, oral allergy syndrome / pollen food syndrome, as it's called nowadays. In the summer, I used to get sniffly. I also have, spoilering, but I also have hay fever-induced asthma. I only tend to get proper asthma symptoms in the summer. It can play up my chest through irritants. Like, I know I do have asthma, but it's massively exacerbated in the summer. I have to have my hair on me at all times, and I have had an asthma attack once. I could not breathe for quite a significant amount of time. We did end up in hospital in A&E. There's a theme. Thankfully it wasn't too bad. I managed to regain the whole breathing malarkey. Fun fact, I was told I was too young to have asthma. It runs in my family. Everyone on my dad's side has asthma. But no, my doctor said I was too young to have asthma. That's also a recurring theme in my medical story. So asthma and hay fever go hand in hand, as well as my allergies to dogs, cats, and anything with fur. And it also can be their saliva, as I have had people go, oh, you might just get hypoallergenic. That doesn't work. I've had dogs bite and scratch, and it just comes up red, irritated, hives, hay fevery. It's just not a pretty look on me. So I try and avoid them anywhere I can. I love dogs though. I'm such a dog person. I have to avoid them. Moving on, RSI. This was actually my first diagnosis when I was 12, 13. I was practicing for a clarinet exam, a grade 3. I'm happy to say I passed it, but I lost the support and my wrists are apparently very weak, which is surprising considering I was doing rock climbing, bouldering. I used to be an outdoorsy person, but then came my health downfall. I started getting a lot of pain in my wrists, and then I started getting a lot of pain in this wrist. I'd overcompensated, I'd done it in, and there's a reason why it hasn't really gone away, but that's just spoiling everything. I'm not gonna get to that bit yet. TMD, temporomandibular jaw disorder. TMD is essentially, for me, this side of my jaw. It can be this side, but it's mostly this side. I have a lot of pain. My jaw has actually locked before. It was a terrifyingly scary experience for me. I'm not going to say the most scary experience of my life. I've had a few of them now, but it was terrifying. I couldn't do anything. We were at the gent's parents' house. I'd woken up. My body was awful because I'd slept on a sprung mattress. I couldn't open my jaw at all. I could barely open it to fit a straw through to get some Lemsip down my throat. And then I started investigating it, and they're like, yes, you definitely have TMD. Fun fact, my top jaw is also overgrown by 4 millimeters, which apparently has caused all this malarkey. And if I my jaw slants this way. You'll never be able to unsee that now. You're welcome. We also thought around this time I had trigeminal neuralgia. However, it has been disproven thanks to this mysterious new thing. But depending on who you ask in my medical team, they're just a bit like, no, yes, it's like a Muppet show. But alongside that, I have myofascial pain disorder. Essentially, from what I understand of it, there's balls of pain that can trigger more pain, because there wasn't enough pain disorders in my body already. Next, we have sciatica, good old sciatica, and it ties in with the next thing on my list, piriformis syndrome. This is mostly in my left hip. My right hip chips in occasionally, but it's mostly my left hip. My left hip has had this type of problem since I was 15, 16. I was in college, walking around with a walking stick. I was channeling house when I was in college. Sciatica is not fun. If you've ever had it, you will know. Piriformis syndrome is the muscle that runs alongside the sciatic nerve, and it was just essentially inflamed. I prefer to call it flamingo syndrome because if you have piriformis syndrome, you cannot stretch that muscle at all. I couldn't stand on it. If I was getting up, it would always be bent because it did not hurt bent, but it hurt when it was flat. Physio was hell. Acid reflux. Oh yeah, forgot about that one. It's really easy to forget about the minor ones. I've learnt to control this a lot through diet. I'm very careful with my diet nowadays, but I still have acid reflux. I also have to take the same pills for acid reflux to protect my stomach from all the medication that the doctors now put me on. I rattle. Like, you can shake me, and I rattle. Costochondritis. I'm just looking at this like, oh, I forgot about all these problems. Costochondritis. So, the ribcage. The muscles in between my ribcage are perpetually inflamed. In some people, it can go away. In some, it can't. I am one of those people. I've had it for a couple of years now. If I put any pressure, I'm not going to. I always make that mistake. On my ribcage, it will hurt a lot. Some days it will hurt worse than others, particularly when I wear bras. So I try not to wear too many bras at the moment because that's not a problem I need. I have gotten it in kind of the back kind of set of ribs. I normally get it in kind of more of the chest bone area, which is real fun when you go to A&E and they're like, do you have any chest pain? Yes. Okay, need you to get all your clothes off. You need to have a heart monitor. It's like, it's not a heart attack. I just have costochondritis. And then I have to explain it's a whole debacle when we go to A&E. Or even when I was admitted, I kept having to explain most of my conditions. I should have just got a recording and just kind of like, oh, hi, you're new. Play. My health's really ramped up past year and a bit. The paranoid person in me says it's been since we moved here because this house has a lot of black mold and I am well aware that isn't good. And that's most of the conditions. Most of them that I've gotten written down. I've probably forgotten some of them. In terms of allergies and intolerances, I'm just going to list them because it's a lot quicker. These are my more anaphylactic based ones. Gluten, barley, rye. We haven't tested if it's different, but we don't really want to test that. And I was under an allergist, but considering when I told him I had a gluten-free pizza with pineapple and ham. I told him it was in a place where seafood was also handled because I am allergic to whitefish and crustaceans and that type of thing. I'm fine with salmon. I'm probably okay with tuna. I don't dare try it. I told him that was also in the restaurant, but he was so convinced that it was pineapple, he refused to test for fish. That went well. But I know I'm allergic to seafood and whitefish because if I've ever had some in the past, like fish fingers, I have a similar type of constricting feeling, throat itching, lip tingling, and even lip swelling from time to time. Like I said, I have oral allergy syndrome, pollen food syndrome, but if they are cooked, the foods are cooked, like apples, pears, peaches, plums, I can eat them, thankfully, still. Although if you get something that's really fresh and organic, this is my problem with fancy places. They do fresh press, which for me is a nightmare. If they do fresh press apple juice, I cannot drink the apple juice. I am all about that from concentrate apple juice. That stuff I can drink. You give me any of this fresh press stuff or like Fentiman's ginger beer, which I'm an avid ginger beer person for nausea, and the few times we've kind of gone out and we haven't had some on us, we've only just found Fentiman's. And I can't drink that. I did have it once by accident, and then we found out there was pear in it. That's bad for me. Comes under the oral allergy syndrome. I am allergic to olive oil. I don't know if this comes under the oral allergy syndrome, but I was having a lot of hideous stomach pain last year, and we found out it was olive oil in the end. Most people I come across are really impressed that I'm allergic to olive oil. And the other one I'm allergic to is mushrooms. These ones are gastrointestinal, olive oil and mushrooms. I don't have any kind of symptoms in my airway. I have it all gastrointestinal for these ones. I did actually have this show up in my blood test that I was allergic to mushrooms, but I found out the hard way that every time I'd eat something with mushrooms in, I'd become violently ill and sick and nauseous. So that's a fun one to find when you're free from a bunch of foods. I'm about to go through my intolerances. And mushrooms are in everything. Also, I really love mushrooms. I love most of these foods, to be fair. I love food. I'm not a picky food eater. Until I have to be. Intolerance-wise, gluten and wheat, I'm still intolerant to it. I'm very well aware of my intolerance versus my allergy symptoms, and with gluten and wheat, we're not sure I'm not celiac as well. We can't be sure because I can't do the test. Milk and lactose, I'm intolerant to both. We're not sure I'm allergic again. I need the tests doing. I have with those very severe pain, nausea. I can't tolerate lactose-free foods either, so we know it's both lactose and milk. Egg, I can't stand. My body doesn't like it. It would make my life so much easier. If I could not be allergic to or intolerant to one of these foods, it would be egg. Because all the gluten-free stuff, I've gotten used to gluten-free food now. I mean, I'd love to eat pizza, but egg isn't a lot of free-from foods. Nearly every free-from food I find has egg in it. So shopping becomes even more difficult when you have to make sure it doesn't have egg in it. And the last one is the nightshade family, which is tomatoes, eggplants, spices, and potatoes. I have to be very, very careful with them. They are an inflammatory food group, so I have to be wary of how much I eat, depending on what my body is like. Also, one I don't have on the list because it is very up and down for me is soy. If I have too much soy, then my body rebels quite spectacularly, and I can't eat soy for many, many months. But if I have it in dribs and drabs, then I'm okay with a little bit of soy. But if I would start eating soy yogurt on a daily basis, I couldn't eat soy. I can't eat tofu and things like that. I mean, that's most of that. I only, as far as we know, medication-based allergy I have is to medical tape. I come up in bumps and irritation. That's fun. So this brings me away from my list and onto the meat, the crux of everything, and why doctors think everything has gone a tiny bit wrong. Yes, this part requires liquid courage. So I'm not going to go through the full 12-month story. I might do that in another video if you want to know. I'm not sure. I have written a blog post about it, link in the doobly-doo down below. So the thing they think I do have is complex regional pain syndrome, CRPS. What the gents and I have affectionately called CRPS, because all it is missing an A. CRPS is just easier. The CRPS is something that can stem from anything from a mosquito bite to a small injury, and your body has an irregular response to it, and it kind of goes tenfold the reaction that it should be. I don't quite know what injury I gave myself last year, to be honest. It could be anything. I did have cramp for ages, so it could be that started all it off, and then it went from one leg to the other. I'm not sure. But it got worse over the whole year. I stopped walking in June, July. I still walked around the house, but it was painful. It was horrendous. In September, we got the wheelchair for the first time, and I could go out again for a little bit because I was housebound. There was no way I was going out. It hurt too much, and it would take me days upon days to recover. In October, it became worse, the pain, but you couldn't see anything. There was no outward sign of the inward pain. Everyone was recommending me to neurologists. Yes, the pain was neurological in type, but it was also muscular in type. I confused everyone, essentially. And I had some facial numbness around that time and some facial pain, which is why I thought it might have been trigeminal neuralgia. Basically, I confused everyone. And then the start of December came. The pain was to the point where I was sleeping for an hour or two every night. The gent and I would have to swap out cold packs. My feet were up constantly because when they were down, they were swollen. I mean, to this day, they still are. My feet at the moment are a interesting shade of purple, and they're swollen. Beginning of December, I had a kidney infection. It was awful. 2 weeks of lying downstairs and just being in immense amount of pain. I didn't really notice time go past. I didn't keep anything down. Probably should have gone to the hospital, but my doctors, again being my doctors, were very much like, no, you're fine. I wasn't fine. I lost far too much weight too quickly, and I should have gone to A&E. But after that kidney infection, everything became 10 times worse. I couldn't walk at all. My feet were red and inflamed most of the time. They looked like this. I took pictures day after day of what my feet looked like, and they were horrendous. I got a care worker in October because I couldn't manage anything around the house. I couldn't do anything, and I could barely work or type or be active in any sense that wasn't just watching Netflix and talking to the gent, trying to sustain a relationship when I was mostly delirious in pain. I went to the doctors the end of the year, and they gave me antibiotics. They said it was cellulitis, even though I'd had it for months upon months. If it was cellulitis, this necrotizing fasciitis thing would have probably killed me by then. So it wasn't that. But I took the antibiotics because, sometimes you have to be a good patient for them to actually listen to you. And then it got worse and worse and worse. And then an effort to keep my feet cool, because by this time I had 2 fans, a bunch of ice packs. I was literally rotating ice packs. I know, bad. But most of the doctors said it was fine because the only alternative for me was a heat that was unbearable. It was like walking on hot pokers and having them from the inside out pierce through my skin whilst molten lava was being poured on my feet. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, if I actually had that, I probably would be, but it felt horrible. It was the worst pain I've ever felt, and I am a pro in terms of chronic pain. This became my 10. It was awful for both of us. And the doctors just kept pushing us away. They kept telling me I should talk to a psychiatrist. I call them therapists. I'm apparently American. The private neurologist did a full scan to my hips, and he was just concerned with MS. He was like, oh, it's not MS. You have no brain lesions, so I think you should go and see someone to talk about your problems, because I think it's more mental. And he phrased it in that kind of way, not in the software hardware one that a lot of us like giving. So if there's something with your hardware, you can see it. There's a broken bone, for example. But if there's something wrong with your software, your nerve connections, the doctors can't see it. So they have to use different methods to treat it, which I understand. But this way, what he was doing was kind of accusing that it was all in my head. At one point, functional disorder was mentioned. And if you start looking at functional disorders, it's essentially when you convert your brain and your anxieties into problems. That's not a very good description. I will leave a link again to functional disorders, but I'm not denying that they're important. But this wasn't right. I've had chronic pain for a long time, so it wasn't right. And then January came, and I gave myself frostbite from trying to keep my feet cool. By that point, I didn't have much feeling in my foot. From maybe around May last year, I started losing feeling in my feet. From my big toe to the rest of my toes, and by January, couldn't feel half my foot. So I couldn't feel when my foot went completely dead. And it went white, and waxy, and hard. The doctors kept trying to tell us after that it wasn't frostbite. The gent and I told the doctors it definitely was frostbite. Then I gave myself a nice big old blister. And then Wednesday the 9th of January, I couldn't take it anymore. A&E basically took one look at me. I was muttering, I was delusional. I was out of it. I just kept saying it's too much because I'd been crying since 11 a.m. consistently, muttering and screaming because it was past my point. It was too much for me. The doctor essentially called me a drug addict, and that was drug seeking, and sent me away after poking my feet more times than I like to remember. That Saturday, I was back in A&E after a bunch of nights where I woke up screaming, because that's all I was doing. I was waking up screaming whenever the medication had worn off or the ice packs had gone. It was not a good time for anyone that was around me, let alone my mental health. Then Saturday, I just screamed and screamed from 5 a.m. till whatever time the nice paramedics came round and put me on gas and air. And they got me to A&E and I was admitted for 12 days. I thought it was erythromealgia, which is a bit like complex regional pain syndrome, but different. Not entirely sure. And then I saw a neurologist a month and a bit ago, and he said, look, you've got fibromyalgia, you've had problems with your wrists, with your RSI, since you were young, you have erythromealgia syndrome, these are sensitivities, your body is sensitive to this thing. I think you have complex regional pain syndrome. So I had an MRI of my noggin about a week and a half ago to check there had been no lesions. I guess a final check for MS, do that way. And then he's pretty happy to say it's complex regional pain syndrome. And that's most of my medical history. He thinks that with the sciatica, the Erythromealgia syndrome, the RSI, they've kind of stuck around because of complex regional pain syndrome. My health is not the best. I'm not stable. I'm not great. My health doesn't know what it's doing still. But we're trying to keep it survivable. We're trying to keep it bearable. Livable, if you will. I was surviving from July. I'm living a bit more now, which I like. There's not pain 24/7 that I can't not function. I can't think of anything but the pain. But now I have moments where I don't even remember what pain is like. That's an exaggeration. There are moments where I don't have pain, essentially. But it's still an uphill journey. There are still doctors trying to take medication away that helps. There is still a pain clinic I need to go to. There is still treatments I need to try. And there is also the chance that it might not be complex regional pain syndrome. If there's anything I've learned from being in the medical system since age 12, with multiple chronic problems, is that the doctors generally aren't right the first time. And they will all disagree with each other. So that is my disability. There's a lot of them, and a lot of them still aren't known. A lot of them make sense, like cramps, make sense, it fits, but because there's so many different problems in my body, most things fit. We're trying to investigate whether or not I have endometriosis as well, but the problem is, with a lot of the symptoms and signs of endometriosis, kind of crosses over with a lot of my other problems. Try and look at a symptom list. Essentially, if I WebMD anything, I'm dying. Or I died when I was 12. So, that's my medical story, or I can't really say highlights, but the main points of my medical story. I'm guessing this is a very, very long video by now. I do plan to make shorter videos. I'm just getting the meat of it out of the way, you know, the what's in my bag, the what's my disabilities. I've no clue what I'll do next. But I hope you enjoyed it. That's probably not the best turn of phrase, but I hope you found this video at least interesting to get to know me a little bit more. I think this is the first time I've publicly listed every single one of the things that's gone on with me. And I've probably still forgotten stuff. I tend to forget stuff. But thank you for listening and watching, and I'll see you next time.